Welcome to my Ruby Slippers. I'm Lily Strong from the blog Lily Strong, and this podcast is my testament to show we can all overcome abuse, misuse, and cruelty. And this is a safe place where we can walk the yellow brick road of healing together, one truth at a time. Today, I'm flying solo again. I am not comfortable talking about some of my complicated story with Silly, which is ironic because the subject today is about telling the truth to your kids. It's hard. It's hard to tell the kids the news when you have left an abusive partner, especially one who hides behind charm and deceit. I feel like the more stories I hear, the more I realize that the abuser doesn't like to admit it and leaves all the fact telling to the abused partner. And that was exactly what happened with me. When I left my narcissistic husband, we didn't immediately tell the kids what was happening. My youngest son was just starting high school, my middle son was in college, and my oldest had just started working his first real grown-up job. Hooray! My ex insisted that we wait until we know what's going on before sharing anything with the kids. And that line with quote unquote, wait until we know, was really his way of keeping control and making sure the truth stayed buried a little longer. And for a minute I agreed. Maybe because I was scared. Maybe because I didn't know how to even begin telling my kids. Probably a little bit of both, really. And to be brutally honest, I had been brainwashed to never make a decision for myself. I always needed the authority figure. I always needed the head of the household to be the final say in everything. But as you've heard in earlier episodes, my life came crashing down in a spectacular fashion, and I couldn't stay. So I packed up my youngest son and we moved to California, just the two of us. The cover story? That I was helping out my elderly parents, which wasn't untrue. It was just not the whole truth. Not even close. The real reason, it was abuse. Years and years of it. Financial, sexual, spiritual, emotional. So much abuse, and so layered and complicated that there was no way to explain it all in just one sitting. There still isn't any way for me to sit down in one sitting. I've created a whole podcast around it. And honestly, I still unpack parts of it every week in therapy. I'm always having to work on something new. So I moved out to California, and my older children did not know why. They stayed back in Texas, where my ex-husband, who was still my husband at the time, suddenly came clean to them and told them he didn't have a job and wasn't working. He didn't tell them the whole truth. He didn't tell them how long he had been out of work. He just told them partial truths. He didn't tell them that we were struggling. Instead, he told them that he was suddenly recommitted to our marriage and was doing everything he could to make us stronger as a couple. Again, not really full out lies, but not really the whole truth either. So about 5 months after I had moved out here, my middle child, Silly, who you usually hear talking on this podcast with me, he came to visit me because it was his spring break from college. I was so ready to have my story known. I had been keeping this secret from my kids. That's a long time. 5 months, half a year. That's a really long time. Here I've been like giving my ex grief about keeping his unemployment so quiet for so long, but this I didn't feel control over. Again, I was deferring back to his better judgment. But I had finally reached the point where I needed them to know. I needed this story to be out, but I had no idea how to go about it. I was, oh my gosh, I was scared to death that I was going to just destroy my kids. I was afraid I was just going to ruin what their outlook on what a happy life should look like. So, ever the preparer, I worked with my therapist for weeks to prepare. I made a plan. I thought through every word, every possible reaction, because I thought Silly had no idea anything is wrong. This is going to be horrible. And of course, he's back in Texas telling them what a great husband he is and how he was a changed man, a born again Christian. And oh gosh, it was just lies on top of lies. And it was infuriating, but it was terrifying. So when I sat Silly down and shared the truth, well, at least some of the truth, something surprising happened. He wasn't shocked. Seriously. Okay, he was like 22 at the time. I figured he had had a whole life of saying, my parents love each other. My parents do what's best for each other. I thought this was going to be earth-shattering, but it really wasn't. So before I told him, we had a couple of just fun-filled days together. I kept my youngest out of school for a couple days, and we just did touristy things and had fun. And then I sat him down and said, okay, I need to have a serious talk with you. And it's going to sound like this is totally out of left field, but I have decided to divorce your father, and I want to tell you why. And guess what? He wasn't shocked. Nope. He wasn't shocked at all. In fact, he seemed relieved. It was like puzzle pieces had finally snapped into place. Like he knew something was off. He knew something was wrong, but he couldn't name it. And of course, now with my 2020 hindsight, I see how much he was abused as well. And it would have been much better if this had happened so much earlier, but it didn't, and I can't regret that because I can't go back and change it. So after I told Silly about it, then I had to go over the whole story again with my oldest. And he had just moved to Seattle where he was doing his big first adult job. I know I say that so much, but it's with so much pride. I'm like, yay. But that was hard in a different way. I have had such a difficult time myself accepting that my life had been a constructed illusion made to completely benefit only my husband. I can only imagine what it's like to hear that that was your father who had betrayed you so completely for the entirety of your life. Again, I'm a planner, so I was really trying to think of everything, and I tried to spare them the worst of it. I kind of gave them the PG-13 version of what was really a horror show because I didn't want to burden them. Not with every disgusting, degrading, and painful detail. And I think I was right to do it that way. But my therapist encouraged me to tell them the big stuff, especially about their father's addiction, because that information could affect them and their future children. And so I did. And about here's where things took an unexpected twist. Several months after that conversation with my kids, I got a phone call from my sister-in-law, my husband's sister. She hadn't talked to me in a long time and just wanted to catch up, and she wanted to talk about something personal and emotional. Her daughter, my niece, who has two small children also on the spectrum, like my kids all are, had just courageously left her narcissistic, controlling, abusive husband. Crazy, right? She started telling me story after story about what her daughter had endured and lived, and it made my stomach turn. Every detail hit so close to home. I was nodding along, feeling sick and thinking, yep, I've lived that nightmare too. Then she said something that caught me completely off guard. I'm surprised my brother didn't tell you about all this. He knows all of this. And that gave me pause because, wow, he hadn't told them anything. Not that I had left him. Not that I had moved to California permanently. Not that I had filed for divorce. Not even that it was already finalized. And a divorce takes time. It's not a weekend in Vegas kind of thing. So, as gently as I could, I said, well, it's a funny thing. And then I told her some of the things that have been going on. But not everything, because again, it is too big of a burden. One of her first questions was, I knew he'd been out of work because of COVID. How long has it been? And that moment knocked the wind out of me because it forced me to confront something I hadn't even realized. I was trying to keep track of who knew what. I was reluctant to share with her the whole story. It wasn't to manipulate. It wasn't to control the narrative because it was completely out of my control. It was because the truth had gotten so layered and complex that I couldn't always remember who knew what. And looking back, I was trying to protect my abuser. It's a really common thing for survivors. We try to protect our abusers. And it made me wonder because even with all the brainwashing I had experienced, my children are always my top priority. So I had to think, did my kids know everything they needed to know? Had I forgotten something really important? Had I sugarcoated too much? How could I answer questions from people without accidentally revealing something that I hadn't yet told my own children? And I'm sorry to say, I don't think there's a right answer. I just know I was doing the best I could, trying to speak the truth while shielding people I love. And honestly, I wish I'd had a better idea at the time of how to share more of the story with my kids. I wish I had known what was enough and what was too much and what could wait, but I didn't. Nobody does. And I still don't. What I do know is that I wanted to protect them. I didn't want to make their father a monster in their eyes, even though he did do things that were monstrous. I was trying to walk the line between truth and tenderness, and sometimes, some days, it still feels like I'm figuring it out in real time, seriously. I'm still walking on eggshells. Okay, back to sharing the important details like, hey, your dad struggles with addiction. Yes, my ex-husband is a sex addict. Yes, it is incredibly uncomfortable thing to discuss with my kids. But I tried to be delicate, even as I was being honest, because my therapist helped me realize silence doesn't protect your kids. It just keeps them vulnerable to repeat the same cycle. As I've gone through my peregrination or my journey, I've found a lot of people don't believe that sex addiction is a real thing. And I didn't know what it was, so I've had to educate myself. Sex addiction is when someone uses sex or sexual behavior or sexual activities in the same way others might use drugs or alcohol. They use sex to escape, to feel numb, to feel powerful, or to avoid dealing with deeper issues. It's really not anything about enjoying sex. It's about being driven by it in unhealthy and destructive ways. It includes keeping secrets, using guilt, compulsive use of porn, being unfaithful, objectifying people and spouses, and taking risky behavior, even when it causes harm to relationships or even one's own well-being. In my ex-husband's case, it was deeply tied to his narcissism, his pathological lying, his emotional manipulation, and his total disregard for consent, even within our marriage. It wasn't about desire. It was all about control. And maybe in the future I'll feel more comfortable telling more detailed stories, but I'm not at that comfort level yet, and certainly not comfortable enough to tell those stories to my kids, even if they are adults. You know, time has passed. I'm a few years down the road now, and we're all healing, my kids and I. We talk, we share, and we process things together, but here's a problem that keeps coming up. I sometimes forget what I have and haven't told them. A memory will surface or something will come up in therapy, and I'll mention it offhandedly, only to realize it's brand new information to them. And that's tough because I don't mean to keep secrets. I just wanted to protect them. But here's the hard truth. There is no perfect blueprint for telling your kids you were abused. We're all out here just doing our best, wading through the emotional minefields and the trauma fog. Have you heard about trauma fog? It is another really real thing. It is a mental haze, a disorienting mental haze that trauma survivors often live in, where you forget details, time gets kind of blurred, and you feel like your memory is just Swiss cheese. It's not being forgetful. It's your brain trying to protect you by softening, I guess, the things that it can't safely process in the moment. trauma fog makes it hard to separate and group your memories into neat piles. It is a safety thing. It is your brain trying to protect yourself. The problem is, later down the line, it gets hard to remember what you've shared and what you haven't. We want to protect our kids, but we also want them to understand. We want to spare them pain, but we don't want to leave them confused or misled. So if you're in this place, whether you're preparing to tell your kids, or you've already told them and are realizing you left parts out, please know this. You are not failing. You are surviving. You are parenting in the wake of a storm, and you're allowed to fumble your way through it. We all are. One thing I've learned, one thing I would suggest. Either spill it all or keep really good records. Seriously. Journals, therapy notes, write emails to yourself, make voice recordings. Because trauma has a way of blurring your memory. And when the time comes to talk, it helps to have an established map. And if your kids ever worry that they might be like their father, remind them that awareness is the biggest sign that they're not. Narcissists don't usually wonder if they're narcissists. Abusers don't wrestle with self-reflection. Compassion, concern, the willingness to heal, those are the traits that break the cycle. And we, my friends, we are the cycle breakers. You know, this whole journey from leaving to healing to parenting through pain, it's brought up a lot of feelings of guilt. Guilt for staying as long as I did. Guilt for not even seeing that I was being abused. Guilt for leaving the way I did. Guilt for what my kids went through, what they saw, what they didn't see. And for a long time, that guilt has just sat on my chest like a boulder that I can't move. But then I did something rather freeing. I wrote a breakup letter to guilt. Because it was something I needed to say out loud, to name and call it out. And so today I wanted to share it with you. This is on my blog, Lily Strong, and it's called Breaking Up with Guilt, My Letter to Guilt. So here we go. Dear Guilt, I don't remember the day you arrived, but I know you were uninvited, like an unwelcome guest who slinks in just as the party is starting, a shadow darkening the doorway. You didn't knock, you didn't ask if you could stay, you simply slipped in, made yourself comfortable, and haven't left since. In fact, you've been quite the moocher, haven't you? You've sprawled out on the couch, eating everything I bring into the house, draining the air, taking up all the space. It's as if you've settled in with no intention of ever leaving. The Kato Kaelin of emotions. But I see you now for what you are. Guilt, you are selfish. You don't care what I need or what might bring me peace. No, you'd rather pull me into a dark corner and whisper every little should have and what if, as if they're the only things that matter. You twist memories and intentions, spinning your own narrative, where I'm always at fault, always lacking. You cling to moments long gone, refusing to let me move forward. And the worst part, you pretend you're here to help. to keep me accountable or to teach me a lesson, but that's all a lie. There is such a thing as healthy guilt. That kind of guilt is a humble teacher. It shows up, delivers its message, then steps aside, leaving me with a renewed understanding, a gentler perspective. Healthy guilt is brief, corrective, and ultimately freeing. But you, guilt? Oh no, you're manipulative. You trick me into believing I'm somehow better off with you here, that I'll find redemption in wallowing, that I'll prove my worth by enduring your constant presence. But you don't give anything back. You only take. In fact, you've broken things, important things, like my confidence, my peace, my joy. You have stunted me, convincing me that I should shrink to make room for you. And I've let you. Letting you pile your blame and shame onto my shoulders until I could hardly stand up beneath the weight. But no more. Consider this your eviction notice. You are no longer welcome here, guilt. Pack up your bags of shame, take your twisted truths and your endless demands, and go. I've spent enough time sacrificing my joy, my dreams, and my life to you. Without you, I'll have the space to breathe again, to stretch into the fullness of my life, to celebrate my worth and to let real healing in. And in that new space, that's where I will learn to forgive myself, to trust my intentions, and to embrace the freedom you have long denied me. Farewell, guilt. You won't be missed. Oh, it's always so weird for me when I go back and read something I wrote a while ago. Oh, but it still hits home. Guilt is clever. It wears so many disguises. Shame, obligation, even love. But when we recognize it for what it really is, we can stop letting it control us. So if you're holding on to guilt like I was, let this be your permission slip to let it go. You're not running away from responsibility. You're ready to walk towards healing. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever felt like the emotional shock absorber for everyone around you? Like your job is to keep the peace, even if it costs you your own? In my blog this week, I'm sharing a very personal story involving a swimming pool and an earthquake. And it has reminded me about why protecting everyone else's comfort can sometimes come at too high a price. Thanks for listening, friends. And if this episode resonated with you, please share it, subscribe it. Catch up with episodes 1 to 10 of My Ruby Slippers wherever you listen to your podcasts. And catch our newest segment, weekly moment of empowerment called On Wednesdays We Wear Ruby. You can find it on our blog and on our Instagram page. And if you're walking your own yellow brick road of healing, know this. Your ruby slippers have always been with you. So, today I leave you with this. There is no perfect script for the truth. There is only your truth, your timing, and your courage. Trust that. Trust yourself. And just like Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz said, there's no place like home. and home is wherever your truth is finally safe to land.